Saudi Arabia is vulnerable. Iran is cornered. The Strait of Hormuz carries nearly 20% of the world's oil supply. And if this standoff crosses the line into open warfare, it won't just be a regional conflict. It will be a global energy shock. Ladies and gentlemen, the Gulf is closer to ignition than most people realize. Welcome to Newsix Brief. Hit subscribe right now if you want geopolitical analysis without the corporate filter. We break down what others won't, every single day. Let's get into it. Tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia are not new, but the regional balance has shifted dramatically. Drone warfare has changed battlefield economics. Missile technology has expanded reach. Energy infrastructure is more exposed than ever. Saudi Arabia's oil facilities are among the most strategically important assets on Earth. Iran understands that. Any disruption to Gulf energy production doesn't just hurt Riyadh. It hits global markets instantly. This is no longer just about ideology. It's about leverage. Let's talk about the nightmare scenario. If Iran were to directly target Saudi oil infrastructure, even temporarily, oil prices could spike sharply within hours. Insurance premiums for tankers would surge. Shipping companies would reroute vessels. Financial markets would react immediately. Now take it one step further. If navigation systems in the Strait of Hormuz were disrupted, through jamming, cyber operations, or naval maneuvering, energy exports could slow dramatically. That choke point handles roughly 1/5 of global petroleum trade. It is the single most important maritime artery in the energy economy, and it is extremely narrow. In a crisis, even rumors of disruption can move markets. Modern conflict in the Gulf would not resemble past wars. Iran has invested heavily in unmanned systems. Low-cost drones can overwhelm expensive air defenses. Precision is improving. Range is expanding. This shifts the strategic equation. Saudi Arabia has advanced defense systems, but saturation attacks challenge even the best intercept networks. Missile defense is not infinite. Interceptors cost far more than drones. Over time, economic asymmetry becomes strategic pressure. The United States maintains significant military presence in the Gulf, but Washington faces a strategic dilemma. Escalate too quickly and risk regional war. Hold back and risk credibility. U.S. policymakers must weigh energy security, alliance commitments, domestic political consequences, global strategic competition. Any sustained Gulf conflict would immediately draw American involvement. But involvement does not guarantee containment. Escalation control becomes the central challenge. Europe is already navigating energy fragility. A Gulf disruption compounds pressure. Strategic reserves can soften the blow, temporarily, but prolonged instability reshapes trade flows. Asian economies dependent on Gulf imports would face similar strain. Financial markets would not treat this as isolated. Capital flight from emerging markets could accelerate. Gold historically rises during instability. Safe haven assets surge. Volatility becomes the new normal. Regional leaders are calculating risk carefully. Saudi Arabia must balance deterrence with economic stability. Iran must project strength without inviting overwhelming retaliation. The United States must consider election cycles, public opinion, and long-term strategy. No actor wants full-scale war. But miscalculation is the constant danger. History shows that escalation often begins with limited exchanges. And once initiated, momentum builds quickly. There are 3 possible paths forward. De-escalation through back-channel diplomacy. Limited strikes followed by containment. Multi-front regional conflict with energy disruption. The third scenario is the most destabilizing. It transforms a regional rivalry into a global crisis. It drives inflation. It stresses alliances. It tests military readiness. And it reshapes political landscapes. The Gulf is one of the most strategically sensitive regions on Earth. Energy flows, military bases, trade routes, and alliances intersect there. If escalation crosses into sustained conflict, the consequences would not stay local. This is not just about Saudi Arabia, not just about Iran. It is about global economic stability. It is about deterrence credibility. It is about whether modern geopolitical rivalry can be contained, or whether it spirals. We are watching a moment where miscalculation could outweigh intention. And in geopolitics, perception often drives reaction. Stay informed, stay analytical, and stay ahead of the noise. This is Newsix Brief. Subscribe for more in-depth breakdowns as this story develops. Now let's go deeper. Because when we talk about the Gulf, we are not talking about just another geopolitical hotspot. We are talking about the single most concentrated energy artery on Earth. The Strait of Hormuz is barely 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Within that narrow corridor flows nearly 1/5 of the world's oil supply and a massive percentage of liquefied natural gas exports. That is not a statistic. That is leverage. And leverage changes behavior. If tensions escalate further, even the perception of risk in Hormuz could trigger cascading economic consequences. Insurance rates for tankers would spike immediately. Shipping companies would demand military escorts. Futures markets would price in uncertainty. The psychological impact alone could move billions of dollars within hours. Energy markets are built on confidence. Remove confidence, and volatility becomes permanent. Oil prices don't wait for confirmation. They react to fear. If credible reports emerge suggesting even temporary disruption in Gulf shipping lanes, energy traders would immediately bid up prices in anticipation of scarcity. Speculation amplifies disruption. Then comes the secondary wave. Refineries recalibrate supply contracts. Airlines hedge fuel purchases. Manufacturers revise cost projections. Central banks reassess inflation risk. Inflation is already a global concern. An energy shock adds fuel to that fire, literally. Gasoline prices affect consumer psychology directly. When energy costs rise, confidence falls. And falling confidence affects elections, markets, and monetary policy. This is why Gulf instability reverberates far beyond the region. Saudi Arabia sits at the center of this equation. It is not only a major oil producer, it is also a symbol of global energy reliability. Any successful disruption to Saudi infrastructure sends a message. It signals vulnerability. That is strategically dangerous. Saudi Arabia has invested heavily in modernizing its defenses, diversifying its economy, and projecting regional influence. But it must balance strength with restraint. Escalation could protect credibility. Escalation could also invite broader conflict. Riyadh's leadership understands that oil infrastructure is both an asset and a target. Deterrence depends on convincing adversaries that the cost of attack outweighs the benefit. But deterrence only works if both sides believe the other will respond predictably. In moments of heightened tension, predictability fades. Iran approaches this equation differently. Decades of sanctions have shaped its strategic thinking. Rather than relying solely on conventional superiority, Iran has invested in missile deterrence, drone fleets, cyber operations, regional influence networks. This model emphasizes resilience over dominance. Iran's leadership understands it cannot outmatch major powers in traditional warfare. Instead, it seeks to complicate, stretch, and pressure. That approach makes containment difficult, because it does not rely on one battlefield. It relies on multiple pressure points. And in a Gulf crisis, pressure points are everywhere. Modern escalation rarely stays kinetic. Cyber operations are quieter, but often just as disruptive. Imagine the following scenario. Navigation systems glitch simultaneously across commercial vessels. Port logistics software freezes. Energy trading platforms experience outages. Banking networks slow down under unusual digital activity. Even temporary disruption creates uncertainty. And uncertainty is destabilizing. Cyber operations allow states to signal capability without crossing clear red lines. But ambiguity increases the risk of misinterpretation. And misinterpretation drives escalation. One of the most unpredictable variables in Gulf tension is non-state actors. Regional networks operate across borders. They do not always act on clear timelines. Increased tension between states can activate independent actors seeking influence. That adds complexity, because state leaders may not control every escalation trigger. A limited confrontation could expand if external groups intervene. History shows that regional conflicts rarely remain bilateral. Once multiple actors perceive opportunity or obligation, conflict layers multiply. It's not just oil. The Gulf is a major artery for global trade. Container ships move consumer goods, industrial equipment, and raw materials through these waters. Even a temporary maritime standoff could disrupt supply chains. We saw during recent global crises how fragile supply networks can be. Shipping delays ripple outward. Retail prices climb. Manufacturing timelines slip. The Gulf is not just a regional shipping lane. It is a node in a global economic system. Disruption here sends signals everywhere. There is another factor often overlooked: insurance. War risk premiums can skyrocket overnight. If insurers classify the Gulf as a high-risk conflict zone, tanker rates increase dramatically. That cost is passed along the supply chain. Eventually, consumers feel it. Financial markets track these signals closely. Bond markets react to risk. Equities reprice. Emerging markets face capital outflows. Investors seek safety. The dollar strengthens temporarily. Gold rises. Volatility indexes climb. Modern markets respond in real time. And markets influence political pressure. Any Gulf escalation places pressure on U.S. leadership. American voters are sensitive to gas prices. Energy inflation translates into household frustration. Political opponents seize on economic discomfort. Foreign policy becomes domestic debate. Presidents often campaign on stability. Escalation challenges that narrative. Even limited military engagement carries political cost. And if markets react negatively, that cost multiplies. Domestic politics and foreign policy are deeply intertwined. Public rhetoric can be dramatic. Private diplomacy is often quieter. Back-channel negotiations frequently intensify during visible tension. Oman has historically served as a mediator. European diplomats often attempt shuttle diplomacy. Regional actors may seek de-escalation even while projecting strength publicly. Diplomacy does not stop when missiles fly. It becomes more urgent. But successful diplomacy requires both sides to see a path to benefit. If either side believes retreat signals weakness, negotiation stalls. That is the central tension in escalation management. Some argue that global energy diversification reduces Gulf leverage. It is true that alternative suppliers exist. It is true that renewables are expanding. But transition timelines matter. The global economy still relies heavily on oil and natural gas. Strategic reserves can cushion short-term shocks. They cannot replace prolonged supply loss indefinitely. Energy transition does not eliminate geopolitical choke points overnight. And in crisis moments, existing dependencies resurface quickly. One of the greatest risks in geopolitical crises is misjudgment. Leaders often assume their adversary will respond within expected parameters. But assumptions fail under stress. Signals are misread. Intentions are misinterpreted. Actions intended as deterrence may be perceived as provocation. This is how limited exchanges escalate. Not necessarily through intent, but through miscalculation. The Gulf is dense with military assets, shipping lanes, and surveillance systems. In such environments, reaction times shrink. Short reaction times increase error probability. And errors in geopolitics carry consequences.